Before the suits. Before the glass buildings. Before the billions. There was a boy. No connections. No capital. No advantage. Just the streets. Every morning, while the city was still waking up, he stepped into traffic with a tray of sachet water balanced on his head. Cars lined up endlessly under the hot sun, horns blaring, engines roaring, and in between them, he moved. Fast. Alert. Observant. Because on the street, hesitation costs you. Some drivers ignored him. Some waved him over. Some tried to cheat him. But every interaction taught him something. How people think. How people decide. How people spend. He wasn't just selling water. He was studying behavior. He noticed something early: the busiest roads made the most money. Location mattered. Timing mattered. Speed mattered. While other boys joked and played between sales, he watched patterns. Which cars stopped longer? Which people bought more? Which hours were the most profitable? Without knowing it, he was learning business principles many people only discover years later. But the streets were not kind. There were days he went home with almost nothing. Days rain scattered the traffic. Days hunger followed him to sleep. Still, he showed up again. Because deep inside him, there was a quiet belief. This is not where my story ends. The street was his beginning. But not his destination. The streets don't reward comfort. They reward awareness. And over time, the boy became sharper. Faster decisions. Better instincts. Stronger resilience. He learned how to position himself where demand was highest. He learned how to speak in a way that made people trust him. He learned how to sell without begging. Because on the street, dignity matters. But survival came with pressure. Every day had a target. If he didn't sell enough, there would be no money at home. No food. No relief. No break. He watched other boys give up. Some disappeared. Some turned to shortcuts. Some lost the discipline to keep going. But he didn't. Because he began to notice something important. The ones who stayed consistent, earned more over time. Not because they were lucky. But because they were reliable. So he built a rule for himself. No matter how hard it is. I show up. Rain or sun. Good day or bad day. Consistency became his advantage. And slowly, something changed. He started making more than the others. Not by working harder alone. But by thinking differently. And that difference was about to open his eyes to something bigger than survival. One afternoon, while running between cars, something caught his attention. Another seller. But this one wasn't moving. He stood in one spot, yet customers kept coming to him. Drivers called him over. Repeatedly. That was unusual. So the boy watched closely. And then he saw it. The seller had positioned himself near a traffic light that stayed red longer than others. More waiting time meant more sales. It was simple. But powerful. That moment changed everything. For the first time, the boy realized. It's not just about working hard. It's about working smart. That same evening, he made a decision. The next day, he moved to a better location. At first, it felt uncomfortable. New environment. Different competition. But within hours, he noticed the difference. More customers. More sales. More control. That day, he earned more than he ever had before. Not because he worked longer. But because he positioned better. And in that moment, a new idea was born in his mind. What if I could control where I sell, instead of chasing customers? That question would later become the foundation of his empire. Because the shift from labor to strategy is where transformation begins. Something had changed inside him. He was no longer just reacting to the street. He was thinking about it, analyzing it, understanding it. He began to see the city differently. Not as chaos, but as opportunity. Traffic was no longer just movement. It was flow. People were no longer random. They were patterns. He started experimenting. Different locations. Different times. Different approaches. Some days he failed. Some days he won. But every day, he learned. And then, he took another step. Instead of carrying water himself all day, he brought in another boy. He gave him stock. Told him where to stand. Showed him what to do. At the end of the day, they shared profit. It was small. But it was a beginning. For the first time, he made money. Without doing all the work himself. That feeling was different. Strange, but powerful. Because now he wasn't just earning. He was multiplying. And deep inside, a new vision started forming. What if I had 10 boys? What if I had 50? What if I controlled the streets, without standing in them? The street boy was evolving into something more. Growth didn't happen overnight. It happened step by step. One boy became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 10. Each one trained. Each one positioned strategically. Each one reporting back. And slowly, the boy who once ran between cars was now managing movement. He tracked everything. Who sold the most? Which locations performed best? What time generated the highest income? He wasn't guessing anymore. He was building a system. But growth came with challenges. Some boys stole money. Some didn't show up. Some tried to compete against him. For the first time, he faced something new. Leadership. It wasn't enough to have an idea. He had to manage people. Set rules. Create structure. So he adapted. Clear expectations. Daily accountability. Consequences for dishonesty. Slowly, the system improved. And then something happened. He stopped selling water himself. Completely. Now, he only managed. And that moment marked a major shift. He had moved from worker to owner. But he didn't know yet. This was only the beginning of something much bigger. Growth attracted attention. And not all attention was good. As his small network of sellers expanded, people began to notice. Older street controllers. Area boys. Local enforcers. Men who believed the streets belonged to them. At first, it was small. A warning. A demand for settlement. Then it became pressure. Some of his boys were harassed. Some were chased away from profitable locations. Some returned with fear in their eyes. For the first time, the system he built was under threat. He had 2 choices. Fight, or adapt. Fighting would cost him everything. So he chose something smarter. He stepped back and asked himself a powerful question. What business cannot be easily controlled by the streets? That question changed his direction. Because he realized something important. The higher you grow, the less you must depend on the street. So instead of expanding deeper into street selling, he began looking for a way out of it. And that decision marked the beginning of his transition. From street operator to real entrepreneur. Leaving the street was not easy. It was all he knew. But growth demands evolution. With the little savings he had built, he made a bold move. He stopped thinking about selling water. And started thinking about supplying it. Instead of running into traffic. He began supplying sellers across different areas. Bulk buying. Distribution. Coordination. Now he wasn't just part of the system. He was becoming the system. At first, it was messy. Logistics problems. Delayed deliveries. Lost inventory. But slowly, he improved. He organized routes. Tracked supply chains. Built relationships with vendors. And then something clicked. He realized that distribution was bigger than water. Much bigger. Everything moved. Food. Goods. Materials. And whoever controlled movement. Controlled money. That realization expanded his vision instantly. He was no longer thinking about survival. He was thinking about scale. One evening, stuck in heavy traffic, he noticed something familiar. Delay. Frustration. Inefficiency. The same problem he once used to sell water was now affecting businesses. Deliveries were slow. Goods arrived late. Opportunities were lost in traffic. And then the idea hit him. Clear. Sharp. Powerful. What if I could build a system that moves goods faster across the city? Not just selling products, but controlling how they move. A logistics network. It was bigger than anything he had ever done. And it required something new. Technology. Vehicles. Structure. This wasn't street business anymore. This was enterprise. So he took a risk. He invested everything he had into starting a small delivery operation. One vehicle. One driver. One route. It was small. But it worked. And within weeks, demand started growing. Businesses needed speed. And he was offering it. For the first time, he wasn't chasing money. Money was coming to him. What started with one vehicle did not stay that way for long. Demand increased. More clients. More deliveries. More opportunities. So he scaled. One vehicle became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became a fleet. He built systems. Tracking deliveries. Managing routes. Optimizing time. Soon, his logistics company became known for one thing. Reliability. And in business, reliability is power. Companies began depending on him. Not just small traders. Large businesses. Distributors. Even corporate clients. And just like that, the boy who once sold water in traffic was now controlling how goods moved across the city. But he didn't stop there. He expanded into other cities. Then regions. Then beyond. His company evolved into a full logistics network. Technology-driven. Efficient. Scalable. And then came the moment that changed everything. The valuation. He had crossed into something unimaginable. He was no longer just successful. He was a billionaire. Years later, standing at the top of a glass building overlooking the same city where he once ran between cars, he paused. Not to celebrate, but to reflect. The noise of traffic was still there. The same roads. The same struggle. The same hustle. But he was no longer inside it. He had risen above it. Not by luck. But by learning. By observing. By adapting. His journey taught powerful lessons. That your environment does not limit you. That small beginnings can lead to massive outcomes. That thinking differently is more powerful than working harder. That systems create wealth, not effort alone. But most importantly, he proved that you don't need to start big. You need to start aware. Because everything he built started with selling water in traffic and seeing what others ignored. Today, his empire moves millions. But his mindset remains the same. Always watching. Always learning. Always evolving. Because success is not a destination. It is a process. And for those willing to see differently, the streets are not the end. They are the beginning. He didn't start with money. He didn't start with connections. He started with awareness. A boy in traffic, watching what others ignored. And that changed everything. Because this story is not really about selling water. It's about how he saw differently, thought differently, and eventually moved differently. And hidden inside his journey are lessons you can use right now. Lesson 1. Your environment is a classroom. Instead of complaining about where you are, start studying it. Ask yourself, what problem do I see every day that nobody is solving? Lesson 2. Stop chasing money, start understanding systems. He didn't become successful when he sold more. He became successful when he learned how to multiply. Lesson 3. Positioning changes everything. Where you stand, who you serve, and how you show up, determines your results. Lesson 4. Growth requires evolution. What works at one level will limit you at the next. Be willing to change direction. And now, here's your action step. Today, don't wait. Take 10 minutes and write down one problem you see around you every day. One simple way you could solve it. And one small step you can take this week. Start small. Because every empire begins with awareness. If this story shifted your mindset, subscribe to Billionaire Backstories. Because the next story might unlock your next level.